Imagine waking up in a world without heat, electricity, or medicine. The cold bites through your rough woolen cloak. The nearest town is days away, and your day begins not with coffee, but with the swing of an axe and the hunger of an empty stomach. Welcome to the Viking Age. You, a modern soul, wouldn't last a day. This isn't an insult, it's just reality. Because surviving as a Viking wasn't just about raiding or fighting, it was about enduring a brutal, unforgiving world with almost no safety net. Let's walk through the average day and see why most of us wouldn't make it to sunset. The sun has not yet risen. It may not for hours. Still, the Viking day has already begun. Inside the longhouse, a dull orange glow flickers from a dying hearth fire. Breath fogs in the frigid air. Your body aches, not from sleep, but from the hard-packed straw mat beneath you. This is where your morning starts. There is no privacy here, no bedrooms, no personal space. You sleep beside your family, your children, and perhaps your livestock. Chickens and pigs were often kept indoors for warmth and safety. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, sweat, unwashed bodies, and manure. The fire at the center of the longhouse burns low. It was never meant for comfort, only survival. It keeps frostbite at bay, but the cold still claws at your skin. There's no insulation. The walls are made of timber and wattle. The roof leaks when the snow melts. Your back is stiff. Your clothes, if you didn't sleep in them, are damp and icy to the touch. There's no wardrobe, no closet, just a chest at your feet holding your few possessions. You splash water on your face from a wooden bucket, but it's half frozen. There are no toothbrushes, no mirrors, no morning routine as we know it. Hygiene is done with whatever nature allows. You rub your teeth with a twig or rinse with cold water if you're lucky. If no tea, you move on. You dress in layers, scratchy wool tunic, coarse linen underclothes, thick socks wrapped with rawhide, leather shoes hard-soled and worn, a cloak fastened with a bronze pin, your only protection against the wind. Fashion is not about beauty, it is about endurance. There are no zippers, no fleece, no waterproof boots. Everything itches, everything smells, but it must keep you alive. The first task of the day is to feed the fire. The coals must be stirred, fresh logs added. It takes time, and your fingers are numb. Children wake early too, not for cartoons or cereal, but for chores. A daughter might help churn butter or grind grain. A son might fetch water or tend to goats. Even the young are hardened by this world. And finally, you step outside. The cold strikes instantly. There is no gentle transition. Your nostrils burn. Your breath hisses into vapor. Ice crusts the ground. The wind bites through every stitch of your clothing. There's no waiting for it to warm up. There's work to be done, animals to feed, water to haul, wood to chop. And so, before the sun even clears the horizon, you are already exhausted. In the modern world, we complain when the thermostat dips below 65 degrees. But in the Viking world, cold was not a season. It was a constant, creeping adversary. There were no comforts, no second chances. You either adapted or you froze, and that was just the morning. When the cold stirs you from sleep, don't expect a warm breakfast waiting. There is no smell of bacon, no eggs frying, no buttered toast or coffee brewing, just a wooden pot over the fire, if there's anything to put in it. This is breakfast in the Viking Age. If you're lucky, the day begins with a thin gruel, barley or oats boiled in water, not milk, not broth, just water. Sometimes it's seasoned with salt, sometimes a bit of goat's milk if any survived the night. On rare days, you might find a dash of honey or crushed nuts. But sweet? Rarely. Flavor? Secondary. This isn't breakfast for enjoyment, it's calories for survival. Every bite is rationed, that small strip of dried herring. It might be all the protein you get today, and food must stretch, not just for days, but for weeks, months even, because winter is long, the stores are low, and hunting isn't always an option when snow buries the forest paths and freezes the rivers. The root cellar might hold onions, turnips, and carrots, but they spoil, they rot. Mold grows in darkness. Sometimes stale bread was soaked in water to soften it. Other times, fermented dairy was consumed for the fat and energy it provided. The taste? Sour, sharp, sometimes foul. But, again, taste was not the point. And what if there was nothing at all? Then you worked on an empty stomach. You walked miles to gather wood, herd animals or repair tools, all while your insides twisted from hunger. There was no pity for it, no time to complain. Everyone was hungry. Now begins the true test, not of courage, but of endurance. Because Viking life wasn't about glory, it was about work. Endless, brutal, unforgiving work. There were no weekends, no time off, no such thing as too tired. If your body moved, it labored. Wood had to be chopped daily, not for luxury, but to survive the cold. The fire needed feeding, the tools needed fixing. A Viking might spend hours just splitting logs, each swing biting into the frozen air, each miss risking a shattered wrist. There were no machines, no chainsaws, no gloves to protect raw hands from blisters, no ibuprofen to dull the pain. The women were no less burdened. They brewed ale, baked bread, churned butter, preserved fish, spun wool, wove cloth, and cared for the sick. And all of it by hand. They butchered livestock, tanned hides, cared for children, tended gardens, and in times of war they defended the homestead too. Domestic work wasn't easier, it was just different and just as critical. Children? They worked too. By age 5 you were expected to contribute. Fetching water from a frozen stream, barely able to carry the bucket. Herding sheep. Gathering herbs. Learning to spin, sew, carve or hunt. Playtime was rare. Childhood was brief. You were small adults trained for survival. And there were no tantrums, no excuses, only expectations. You're also part of a strict social system. Jarls ruled, carls worked, thralls obeyed. Honor mattered more than comfort. Disrespect your chieftain, face exile, break the law. You could be outlawed, stripped of all protections. And if you were a woman, life was no easier. You had more rights than in other medieval cultures. Divorce, inheritance, but you still bore the weight of the home, childbirth without medicine, and social judgment. Modern freedom? It didn't exist. Your role was assigned, your status known. Step out of line and pay the price. To live as a Viking was to live on the edge of survival, of violence, and of infection. Yes, the Norse were cleaner than many medieval Europeans. They combed their hair, trimmed their beards, and even carried grooming kits made of bone and iron. But don't let the comb fool you. By modern standards, their world was filthy, and dangerously so. Bathing happened once a week if you were lucky, usually on Lagardaga. Washing day. No hot showers, just a wooden tub filled with cold water, maybe heated over the hearth if fuel allowed. Soap, as we know it, didn't exist. Instead, Vikings used lye-based pastes, harsh on the skin and eyes. Better than nothing, but barely. There were no shampoos, no deodorants, no lotions, just water, ash, and willpower. Lice were constant companions, fleas too. You could comb them out, scrape them off, but they always came back. And illness, it didn't ask permission. Coughs became fevers. Fevers became death. A simple scratch from a farming tool could fester. There were no antiseptics, no bandages that stayed clean, no antibiotics to fall back on. If you were wounded in battle or accident, you prayed for a healer nearby. These women, or occasionally men, relied on herbs, honey, and experience passed through generations. They packed wounds with moss, chewed yarrow root to reduce fever, and used garlic to fight infection. Sometimes it helped, sometimes it didn't. A deep wound was a gamble. A broken bone could leave you crippled, and a head injury, likely fatal. There were no surgical tools, no anesthesia, just grit, and maybe a horn of mead. Dental care was a horror show. Toothaches were common, rotting molars, inflamed gums. With no dentists, your options were limited. Ignore the pain, or yank the tooth out, without antiseptic, without numbing, without clean tools. Just force, a scream, and the hope you wouldn't get an infection. Many Vikings lived with broken, ground-down teeth. Some even filed grooves into them, perhaps for ritual, or perhaps for intimidation. Whatever the reason, it was done with bone tools and no pain relief. And childbirth? A sacred, terrifying event. It took place on the floor of a smoky longhouse, often in winter, with only the warmth of a fire and a few helping hands. No midwives with training, there were rarely clean linens available, and no access to sterile instruments. Complications were common: breech births, hemorrhages, infection, for the mother and for the child. Survival was a coin toss, and many didn't make it. Stillbirths, infant death, mothers lost in labor. It was tragic, but expected. Without hospitals or emergency services, even the most minor of illnesses could be deadly. A stomach bug could deteriorate into dehydration. A fever may be a sign of pneumonia. A migraine, untreated, could leave you blind. A twisted ankle could become infected. A cough might be tuberculosis. You either endured it or you didn't. In the Viking world, nature was not a backdrop, it was an adversary. The environment didn't care if your harvest was due or your ship needed safe passage. It didn't care if your family was starving or if your roof was leaking. The weather in the north was raw, relentless, and indifferent. A single storm at sea could end your life. Once on the treacherous waters, it was only man and sea, with no one there to answer a distress call. Weather forecasts, radio warnings, and compasses did not yet exist. That leaves you with only your instinct, superstition, and the hope that the gods were with you. One rogue wave, and you were gone. One shattered mast, and the icy sea swallowed you whole. And on land, things weren't much kinder. Spring rains could flood your fields, and summer droughts could kill your crops. And winter? Winter was a predator. Blizzards came swiftly, causing temperatures to plummet rapidly. At times, even the livestock froze. Roads vanished under drift. They weren't paved or lined with streetlights. They were crude and muddy trails, often patrolled by predators, both man and beast. Evening comes on with a gust of wind and a chill. If you're lucky, you've eaten fragments of salted fish, turnips, and a gulp of ale. With the family gathered in the longhouse for the night, it is noisy with the sound of the crackling fires, people snoring, and children crying. But night brings danger. The darkness was no shield from adversaries and intruders. You would likely never experience a truly restful night of sleep, always on guard in case of an attack. Violence wasn't just on raids, it was part of life. Disputes were settled by duels, and feuds could erupt into bloodshed. Justice meant revenge more often than jail. And if your clan was attacked, you fought or died. So now, ask yourself, could you make it one day in the life of a Viking? Modern life has softened us, but the Viking world demanded endurance, resilience, and the kind of grit that few today possess. You wouldn't last a day, and yet they lived, thrived, and carved their legacy into history. So next time you admire the Viking spirit, remember what it really took to survive. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the harsh reality of Viking life, give us a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of the Norse world, told from the past for the present.